a very language-friendly, DEI-focused, heavily participated in presentation.
There you go. And that was the subtext of what we're going to be talking about.
Yes, bilingual engagement, multilingual engagement on many fronts.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome you today. Those who don't know me, my name is Susan Asadi. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Chamber New York City. And we are very pleased that today we're going to be focusing on gaining confidence while speaking a new language. And shortly, Melanie Fox, the founder of SpeechFox and the current advisory board chair of our chapter here in New York, will share her expertise in this area. But if there are any few here who may not know much about the Global Chamber, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. We're a growing global community of CEOs, executives, and leaders, many of them who are with us today. We're in over 525 regions around the world. So as Doug Brunke, founder, likes to say, we're pretty much everywhere. So I'm grateful our members have joined us. And as I said a little bit earlier, and I think we've done that, mute your microphone if you are not leading off the program from the top. So we're helping our members to find ways to grow their companies within and across metropolitan areas. And we are the only organization in the world with hundreds of locations that helps our executive do just that. So now I'd like to introduce you to the MC for our panel today. His name is Christopher Shelley. Raise your hand, Christopher. He is a wedding celebrant, an event host, and author. He's appeared on The Rachel Roy Show. He's been featured in many other outlets such as Bustle and Nearly Newed. And he's also written a book on how to craft the best ceremony. So now he's bringing that performing experience to audiences around the country with his interactive keynote show experience, People Skills Live. So Chris shows humans how to talk to humans, even as AI takes over our lives. I love that. So anyway, Christopher is also a member of the National Speakers Association, a certified celebrant from the Celebrant Foundation and Institute. He's passionate about how best words, humor, and energy celebrate any occasion. So now I'm proud to say he's one of Global Chamber's New York City members, and you better get ready because between Christopher and Melanie, their energy is certainly going to infuse you throughout this 1 hour. Christopher, take it away. Thank you so much.
Susan, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. It could be a big wave, no matter where you are, a nice big wave. And I want to make sure you're listening. Very good. Thank you for being here. I'm very excited about this because Melanie, her whole niche, her whole topic, everything she's devoted her professional life to is fascinating to me. Ever since I was an acting student at Boston University 30-something years ago, and we learned voice and speech, we learned how to get rid of our regional accents, we learned how to become neutral with our accents, then we learned how to do other accents. We learned all about this amazing alphabet that exists called the International Phonetic Alphabet, how sounds and how you can write them out. Fascinating. And in my life, both as a wedding celebrant and as a writing tutor and things like that, I've come to realize how important it is to be able to speak to anyone clearly, whether you're in a country where you don't speak the language, whether you're speaking to someone who maybe doesn't know English as their first language. There are ways to meet people where they are, to speak clearly with them on their level, in their accent, in their language, if possible. And if you're able to do this, if you make the effort to do this, you can build connections and foster trust with someone whom you otherwise wouldn't be able to connect with at all. So language is hugely important. And I'm very, very excited to hear what Melanie has to say about this. So now I'm going to do a completely spontaneous and improvisational introduction for Melanie Fox that's not at all been written by Melanie Fox and sent to me via email. Ready? Here we go. Melanie Fox empowers executives and public figures to speak clear, confident English through accent reduction, interview and presentation training. She also trains actors to master authentic English and Spanish dialects. She's a paid public speaker who helps her audiences hack into language, and she's the host of a new podcast starting next month called Hack That Accent, or as we said back in Boston, Hack That Accent. Through her brand, SpeechFox, which is just one of the best names of a company ever, SpeechFox Melanie helps non-native English speakers articulate clear business English, and she empowers performers to master dialects from around the world. Melanie has coached speech and pronunciation for over 20 years. She holds a Master's of Science in Linguistics from Georgetown University, a Bachelor's of Science in Linguistics and Spanish from Georgetown University. What I'm saying is Melanie really knows what she's talking about. So without any further ado, I want you to get the most out of Melanie. Melanie, was that enough of an intro and a build-up?
That was,
ladies and gentlemen, Melanie Fox.
yay! Thank you so much. That was the best intro I've ever received, and it was way worthy. We're not worthy. I'm not worthy. Anyway, thank you so much, Christopher, and Chris. Sorry, I called you by the name that you said. It makes you sound like you're in trouble. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Susan. And I'm so excited to be able to present for you guys today. And I'd love this to be as engaging as possible. So feel free to use the chat. We will have a section for Q&A later. I want to make sure we get through a lot of the content before we get to the Q&A, but feel free to pop things in the chat and we'll come back to them later. And again, I hope that you will get a lot out of this and it will inspire you to either keep learning or start learning another world language. So today's topic is gain confidence speaking a new language, whether it's English or another world language. So let's get right into it. First, the agenda. There we go. A mad clicker, so let's let that run. So the agenda for today is, first, I want to get to know you guys to see who's in the audience and what's your language learning experience. Then I'll share a little bit about my language learning journey. And then we'll talk about the what and the why of learning a new language, the current landscape, the benefits and challenges of learning a new language, especially as an adult, and then some strategies on the how. How can we make it more fun? And how can you encourage yourself to do some public speaking in this new language once you're at the level that you feel like you can converse? And then we'll have a panel discussion with both a learner of English, who is a native Spanish speaker, and a learner of Spanish, who's a native English speaker. Did I say that right? English to Spanish and Spanish to English. And then finally, we'll have Q&A at the end. But as I said, please feel free. We'll have some chances to participate in a poll. And then sometimes you can type in the chat. And if you've got questions, feel free to write them down, and then later we'll have somebody help take those questions and we'll answer them one by one. So first, let's ask the audience. Now, your turn to share your learning journey a little bit. So if Joey, would you launch the poll, please? I put the slide up just in case you can't see the poll. If you can see the poll, please check as many as you need to tell us what is your first language. And by first language, I mean any language that you spoke as a child that you can converse in without thinking. And so check as many boxes as you feel are appropriate for your first language. Okay, I believe the way the polls are set, we have to do them all first. Joey, is that correct? And then we'll show them all later? That looks like the way it's been. Okay, so answer that question. We'll later reveal the answers. The next question, let's move on to the next one, is I consider myself, and choose one of these. Which best fits you? Are you monolingual, period, meaning perhaps you speak only English, or I'm assuming if you're at this presentation, you at least do speak some English. So are you monolingual, or are you monolingual but starting to get conversational in another language? Maybe you took it in high school or for fun. Monolingual, but fairly fluent in another language. So you don't feel like you grew up bilingual, but there's another language that you could easily converse in and maybe even do business in that language. Are you bilingual at a native level? So you grew up speaking 2 languages, or trilingual or more? Did you speak 3 or more language? Do you speak 3 or more languages natively? And finally, one more question. As an adult, have you tried to learn a new language? And if so, so is it nope? So that's one answer. And the others are you dabble, you immerse yourself in the culture and go further, or you even try speaking to people you know, or even strangers, for example, during travel. So if you could answer all of those questions, and Joey, I think you can see when the answers stopped moving. So if you can answer those, that would be great. And then Joey, if you would, when it stops moving, we can show the results of who is in the audience.
Will do.
All right. Are folks, did you get your answers in? So we can see who you are?
We have 18 people in right now. If 19, if you're still answering, try to wrap that up if you can.
Yeah, just to pick whatever you think is the best answer that describes you. We're just trying to get a feel for the room. All righty. All right, let's do another 5 seconds and then let's hit it, Joey, and see what we got.
You got it.
All righty.
All right, there are our results.
Okay, so we've got native language. This is so interesting. So English and Spanish tied for first place. So we may have a lot of bilingual speakers in the room, some French, and then we got a little bit of other. So for the others, let's check the chat. Did you put in Spanish and French? Okay, so if there's any other languages, feel free to type them in the chat. I'd love to know what we're seeing here. And then, oops, I lost the poll. For the final answer, Joey, what do we got?
For the final answer,
Oh, sorry, so we've got English, Spanish. I lost the other two because my poll has disappeared. So can you tell me what was the responses?
yeah, we have no German, Italian, Mandarin, Chinese, or Arabic, but I do believe we had a Japanese in the chat.
Got it. Perfect. And I got my poll back. Okay. So it says now, I consider myself the second question. We've got some monolingual conversational in another language, some that are fairly fluent. That was the most popular answer. So a lot of folks on the call are fairly fluent in another. A few are bilingual and a few are trilingual. That's so great. I'd love to see that. And I'm jealous. So you grew up speaking 3 or more languages at home. If you want to expand on that and put it in the chat to share, that would be great. And then on the call today, so I've got a challenge. 20% have not tried to learn a new language as an adult. So it's my goal today to get you to want to learn another language as an adult. Some are dabblers, that's 20%. 33 say they immerse themselves in the culture with movies and music. And the most popular, they try speaking to strangers at home or during travel or to people you know. So that is very encouraging that the folks who are learning a new language are really trying to use it. That is super great to hear. And we certainly want to encourage that from everyone. So that is my challenge for the day. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. And thank you to Insignia. So you just heard from Joey Streets, which is his real name. What a cool name. I said, if I had that name, I would become a rapper right away. And Joey is with Insignia Training Partners. And if you want your event to be produced by someone else, meaning that somebody will run the mute button and the poll questions, and if your PowerPoints fail, they got your back. And if there are any other technical glitches, Insignia will make sure that your presentation runs smoothly. So please take a screenshot of this or take a picture with your phone. I have Bernie, the owner's contact information on the right, and a little bit of a summary on the left. But if you're curious about them, please reach out. I love them. This is about my 3rd time working with Insignia, and they are wonderful people. And thank you, Joey.
Thank you for having us.
Perfect. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'll go a little quickly on this because it's not really about me. It's about our language learning. But just so you know that I've got some years behind my 12-year-old looking appearance, I will tell you about me. All you need to know is I'm 44 and everything I own is covered in glitter. But beyond that, the things that are more relevant to this presentation is I'm a speech coach. Accent reduction, dialect coaching for actors is the middle one. Accent reduction for usually business people and public figures. And the presentation and interview skills can be for anyone. People that I work with are both native and non-native speakers of English. And my goal is to help people gain clear, confident communication. And my specialties, as I mentioned, accent reduction, dialect coaching, presentation, and interview skills. And a quick history about me. As I said, I've been coaching for 20 years because I look kind of childlike. This confuses people. But yes, I was coaching 20 years and in the corporate world for the same 20 as I was building my business. And the reason I mention this is I myself have had to do a lot of presentations, a lot of travel. I've been in leadership, in sales, in customer and tech support, in recruiting, training, and hiring. So I've had a lot to do on the front lines with language and communication, and not just for English, but in world languages as well. And I like to call it my street cred. I have a bachelor's and master's in linguistics, as Chris kindly told us. And I've been, again, both anywhere from an individual contributor to a leader of an Americas region for a big language company. I've worked for both tech companies that helped with language learning through apps, both for English pronunciation. Bold Voice is the app that I helped build, and also Mango Languages. I helped sell that into the education and corporate and library markets, as well as higher ed. And so I've both worked in the tech side and the testing side, as well as the service provider side of language learning. So that's where my background comes from. But the most important thing for me is how I got into language learning. And this is me looking almost exactly the same in the first grade, except I had bangs. And this is my friend Ada, who became my best friend. And she had come from China. Her parents spoke Cantonese only. And when I would go over her house, I got to hear Cantonese and I got to help her parents, especially her mom, pronounce English. And I used to use like a Sharpie and a big piece of paper and write out what I thought in my six-year-old mind was phonetics. And I used to show her the shape of my mouth. And I used to teach them to pronounce English. And in return, they gave me Post-its with Cantonese phrases that I treasured for years. And I still say a lot of these phrases, which allows me to buy and sell myself mangoes mostly. But it got me really into learning languages and teaching languages at the ripe old age of 6. And my best superpower is my lack of shame. So if anyone is afraid to speak the other language because they're afraid they'll make mistakes, please borrow my lack of shame. Really, it just puts you out there, allows you to try out your language, and a lot of people will just appreciate the effort and really help you along. I've never regretted attempting language, even when I accidentally made mistakes. I also studied in Spain for a year or 2 semesters in Salamanca, and I've traveled a bit, and I dabble in so I speak, English is my only native language. Spanish is my most fluent non-native language. I speak some Italian, and then I dabble a little bit in French, German, a tiny bit of Brazilian Portuguese, and just some fun phrases in Greek and Russian. So I wouldn't say that I'm fluent in those, but I will say I dabble in those other languages, and I just love the sounds of languages and learning about new cultures so that I can travel to the country and not be that American in the white sneakers, the hat, and the jeans yelling, "Does anyone speak English?" in the middle of the town square. Okay, so let's get into the real stuff. So let's talk about the what and the why of learning a new language. So it should be welcoming and inviting of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's talk about the current landscape around the world of bilingual and multilingualism. 43% of the world's population is bilingual. They speak 2 languages fluently. And 17 speak 3 or more languages fluently. So we've got 2 or more, and then, 2, my apologies. 43% speak 2 and 17% speak 3 or more around the world, which is a great number. However, in the US, our number is about half that, depending if you count the bilingual or the multilingual. We've only got 22%, 1 in 5 people being bilingual. LOTE, LOTE means languages other than English. In the 1980s, or at least in 1980, that stat was less than half. So the good news is we're moving in the right direction towards bilingualism because we've doubled since the 80s, but we're at half of what the world the numbers the world put out in terms of bilingual or multilingualism. 78% of Americans just speak English. So again, we're about half the average worldwide. We need to bring that number up and make ourselves more competitive on the global landscape. So here's a little bit of a heat map where you can see around the world some stats, and the dark blue are the more multilingual. The green, like you'd see in a lot of, say, Mexico and South America, are more monolingual. And the US is a little bit above that in its multilingualism. But again, you can kind of get from this heat map where we are on the global stage. And then another quick bit to take a look at, in case you were thinking, well, what language should I learn next? Maybe you want to learn a language that is a very popular language around the world. You could think of it in number of native speakers, where Mandarin Chinese is leading the pack, followed by Spanish and then English. Or you could look at the countries, the speakers that are native or non-native, meaning they can communicate in the language, but they may not have grown up. And you could see how much bigger English is on that pie on the right, because many countries have their people learn English early on in school and use it for business purposes. So English has become a very dominant language across the world, but as you can see, it's made up of a lot of non-native speakers, and it makes other countries more competitive when they learn English. So shouldn't we do the same and be more competitive by learning other languages? So Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, Hindi, you can see Bengali, Portuguese, Russian, Japanese are on the left-hand side as languages by number of native speakers. A lot of folks are feel encouraged to learn Spanish, French or Arabic, for example, because there are many countries that speak that language and maybe you want to travel to one of them. So just food for thought on what language to maybe learn next. And then I wanted to talk about this analogy. So I worked for Berlitz, the big language company, a little bit ago. And when I worked for them, they had this phrase saying, in other countries, English is bread, but in the US, learning another language is cake, meaning English was so important to putting food on the table in another country potentially. But in English, because in the US, because we have English and don't necessarily need another language for business, it was a nice to have. And I thought that was an interesting analogy. So of course, I asked AI to make me an image, and I could not get over the guy with the breadstick head in the back cheering on this match between bread and cake. And Joey helped me realize that that breadstick also had 3 arms, and then there's a woman with toast on her head that did not have all of her limbs, but looked very excited to watch this match. So anyway, this is the bread versus cake analogy. So let's talk about why. Some benefits in general. Improved cognitive skills. Who doesn't want that? Good communication skills, cultural insights, career advantages, travel opportunities, educational opportunities, and also my favorite, improved native language skills. So when you learn an L2, also known as second language, and I'll take a moment to talk about that, what second language means, but if you are learning another language, it actually helps your understanding of your native language. And what's not to like about that? So I highlighted my favorite benefits. And also for adults, it improves brain health and helps delay cognitive decline. Again, who doesn't want to have good brain health? It's good personally, professionally, helps you make new social connections, helps you better understand the world, and helps relieve stress. So again, great benefits for adults. Now, I wanted to take a second to talk about the word L2 and L1. L1 just means native language, the language you grew up speaking that you learned while you were a kid. And L2 is a second language. It doesn't mean it's the second one you learned. It means that it's a language that you picked up when you were a little bit older. Usually they use puberty as the age to cut off, and they call it the critical period, the thing that changes when your brain changes. After this puberty time, your brain changes, the critical period has happened, and now when you learn a language, you have to actually learn it in a very with a concerted effort. You're not just going to pick it up natively like a kid would do with no effort. So let's talk about those challenges in your L2 after the critical period. Your brain plasticity changes as an adult. You need structured learning. It's not just effortless like kids. You have to work on your pronunciation and accent in order to sound clearer and more like a native. Otherwise, you'll probably sound like you're speaking your language's phonetic inventory superimposed on the new language. So I can think of, when I was studying abroad in Spain, the way I spoke when I first got there sounded more like English than like Spanish until I really absorbed the accent and made a concerted effort to do so. And that's why I'm an accent coach. A lot of non-native speakers need the extra help. A big one, being self-conscious and having a fear of mistakes as an adult gets in the way and really hinders language learning. And finally, adults are low on time and sometimes on motivation. So if you make it a priority, that will help overcome a motivation constraint. And there's a guy, if you want to get really dorky, a guy named Stephen Krashen. He was a linguist, or he is a linguist, and he made hypotheses for what happens when you learn a second language and what processes are going on in the back of your head. The first hypothesis was acquisition versus learning. I'll quickly just say acquisition is what you do as a kid. It's effortless. Learning is what you need to do as an adult to actively get this language into your brain. Monitor hypothesis just means that you learn rules and grammar, for example, grammar, vocabulary, whatever rules you pick up, and you apply these to filter your language in this new language as you speak. So it's almost like as you're speaking, you're trying to filter using rules that you learned. Natural order just means you learn the big important things first and the little details next. The input hypothesis, and again, I'm making this one blink. This is something that is actually very useful in language learning. The input hypothesis says that it's best to learn just above your level. So if you're a beginner and you want to advance, you need to raise the bar just a little so that some new words and new phrases that are just out of your reach are in your input or in your what you're hearing and what you're exposed to, so that you're able to move up this one level. So not going from beginner straight to advanced, you'll be lost. But if you go from beginner to, say, advanced beginner, or something that's a step up from where you are, that's the best way to increase your learning in the new language. And finally, the one that has to do with our fears is this affective filter. Picture it like a gate. When you're trying to learn a language, if you're afraid, that gate goes up and it makes it harder for you to learn. So motivation helps lower the gate. Self-confidence helps lower the gate. Anxiety brings that gate up. So what can you do? Try to figure out things that are motivating for you in order to learn. How can you kind of give yourself a confidence booster? And how can you lower your anxiety in order to make this filter go down and the language come in, and also will help you to speak? So that's the biggest one from Krashen, the affective filter. So do you feel like this when you're attempting to speak another language, especially in the country of that language? All right. So the most important part, how? Now we know what and maybe why, but how do we do it? So let's talk about another dorky word, andragogy. What on earth is that? Well, you know how pedagogy is learning for kids? Andragogy is learning for adults. So if we know a little bit about adult learning, we could make our language learning journey a little bit better or easier. Adults love self-directed learning with a flexible environment and a flexible path. We like to incorporate life experiences and make it super practical. So whatever we're learning has a real world application. We're not like kids where we're motivated by the test that's coming up. We need to be motivated by usage. Centered around problems, of course, respectful and inclusive, have a flexible learning environment as well, schedules, formats, timing. And again, as if we can apply the knowledge immediately and actually use it in our life and work, we're going to be a lot more likely to have this learning stick. And here's a guy doing some adult learning on an Amtrak with an iPad, using technology to fit into his busy adult life. A little bit more to just think about what is language. There's receptive and productive language, meaning some that we kind of take in passively and some that we have to produce actively. And there are spoken pieces and written pieces. So all together, we get listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Not all languages have a writing system, but most have these four. And again, I love being dorky with linguistics. We could also look at it from like, what are the components of language from this angle? Phonetics is the speech sound. Phonetics is the study of speech sounds, and I'll talk more about that later. Phonology, phonemes mean the units of speech sounds in a particular language. Morphology is words, syntax is phrases, semantics is the literal meaning of phrases and sentences, and pragmatics is the context meaning in context of discourse, meaning conversation level. If you say it's hot in here, does that mean open a window? That's discourse, meaning I said something. The literal meaning is I'm hot because the temperature is high, but my meaning to you is make it better for me by opening a window. Okay. So let's take a look, because today we've got English and Spanish learners with us in the panel. Let's take a look at English and Spanish on the tree of languages. So they're both Indo-European languages, but you could see English is Germanic on that branch and Spanish is a Romance language. So there are going to be some major differences in sounds, in grammar, in structure. So we can take stock of this. And, it is another way that if you said, hey, I want to learn an easy language for me, pick something on a similar branch and you'll have, an easier time picking it up. Not that that's the only way, but if you said, hey, I want to learn a language that's not super challenging, pick one in the same tree. And my biggest passion in all of my speech coaching is really when it comes down to pronunciation and accent reduction. So what to do about your own accent in a language? First, find the challenge sounds. What's a challenge sound? Things that are not in your native language, but are in the target language. And when you find these, be extra aware of these sounds and be careful not to have what's called negative transfer or interference. Basically, if I go to speak Spanish and they have the ch sound, and I say, oh, we don't have ch for Jose, I'm going to just make this the J, Jose. That's not going to sound like Spanish. Or maybe I say, okay, I don't have the ch, but I have the H sound. I'm going to say Jose. So maybe that's not going to be as clear as actually imitating. Be a parrot. Imitate the exact sound you hear the native speaker making, and don't assume that all of the sounds in your language are going to be completely the same as your as the second language that you're learning. So let's do something practical. Okay, so it said freak out and not geek out, but close enough. So here is Chris's favorite chart, the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. And the reason that, thank you, I got an applause. Wow. So the reason that I love working with this chart with my clients is that it really breaks down the sounds into pieces that are tangible. So for example, the location of the sound is on the top part of the chart going across, and dental is the part that means out, the tongue out in between the teeth. So if my tongue is out in between the teeth, I have these two sounds, and they are not found in many languages. Unless you speak Greek or Arabic or Spain Spanish, you probably don't have these sounds. And Spain Spanish does it a little differently. But the idea is that for these sounds, you take your tongue and stick it out of the mouth like this. And that position is not common in many languages. So if you're not a native English speaker, likely you'll need to learn this one. Other unpopular sounds are American R, dark L, like the one in Pole, and the V and W distinction. And so let's just take a look, because again, two of our panelists today our two panelists are a Spanish speaker learning English and English speaker learning Spanish. So if you look at this inventory, and you could Google whatever language you're learning online, you can see versus the other language you're learning, you can see where the overlap is in the middle. But on the left are sounds in Spanish that are not in English, like the nya, or the ra, and the kh, not found in English. But in English, but not found in Spanish, are those TH sounds I mentioned, H, J, ing, sh, v, w, and some other sounds that we have. So there are a bunch of sounds that if you're not a native English speaker, but you speak Spanish, you'll probably have to learn. And also for vowels, we've got a slightly blurry diagram, but you can see the ones in blue are the vowels that are found only in English and not in Spanish. Sorry, I don't mean only, but English only, not Spanish. The green ones are shared in both. And there are no vowels that are in Spanish, but not English. So English speakers may have an easier time with the Spanish vowels, but our letters that are used to make those vowels are different from Spanish. So we have to be aware of that. And if you're about to learn Spanish, you might say, oh, great, it's super easy to pronounce Spanish. Well, not necessarily, but the vowels may be fairly easy for you. But trust me, the grammar will probably be a little bit more challenging. And again, for Spanish speakers learning English, you may say, wow, the pronunciation's hard, but your grammar is a little bit easier. So again, always some trade-offs, but just good to know what sounds are different in your language than the other, than your native L1 versus the L2. So these are the types of things I use with my clients to work on accent reduction. We won't go into gory detail today, but I'll give you an example of the TH sound. The TH sound in English, as I said, is made with the tongue out between the teeth. And a lot of times a non-native speaker will replace it with a T or a D. So I'll show you what that looks like. So on top, you see the location of T and D. So if everybody wants to try, even though you're not, you're on mute probably, go ahead and just make the words tin and den and feel where your tongue is, and feel that the air is not flowing. When you first start that sound, the air is being blocked, t and d. But when you do the THs, we have the tongue out and the air flowing. And th. The top sounds are called voiceless or unvoiced, meaning it's no vocal cord vibration, just air. But on the lower sounds on each pair, you'll see the voiced sound, which means vocal cords vibrating. I'm doing this super fast just to give you this overview. But if we want to try it out, we can use what's called a minimal pair. And later on, if anyone wants to volunteer and try it, we can go back. But I'll just, for the interest of time, read the pairs: taught, thought, hitty, pithy, wit, with, den, then, reading, breathing, seed, seethe, and a sample sentence to help you practice the sound. I thought that you taught me how to catch my breath through deep breathing when I'm tired. So mixing up the THs and the T and the D are a great way to practice not only the sound pairs for muscle memory, and the sentences to try it out in real time. So that's a quick note on how I do accent reduction with my clients. And now for a fun video on what could happen if you accidentally substitute the TH sound with something else.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
I'll stop the Berlitz commercial there, but it was a very cute little commercial that's just, toying with the sounds of languages and saying what happens if you get a sound wrong. So thinking and sinking clearly made the difference in somebody's misunderstanding or would have helped to facilitate their understanding if they had that sound down pat. I'll mention that I have some free downloads on accent work on my website, but I'll show you through a QR code later how you can get that. So I'll skip. So let's talk about ways to learn. And this is one of, we're getting towards the end of the presentation. So we'll do some strategies, some motivation, and then the panel, and then the Q&A. So let's talk about some strategies, because people always say, Mel, you love languages, you like learning them. How should I do it? First thing, really easy, you can download some apps. I'll talk about them momentarily. And these are the strategies with technology. Another thing that I have not tried, but I was looking at it online and it looked very interesting. Tandem and HelloTalk are both online language exchanges where you could chat with people through text, video, audio, and it could be a really cool way to meet people. Of course, when you're talking to strangers, you have to make sure that they're not just lonely and going to stalk you. So be careful, but it seems like these are regulated communities that look like a lot of fun. You could try VR to simulate immersion if you have one of those headsets. Foreign language films and TV shows, I quote foreign language. We say this in English, but world language is another name for that. And you can use subtitles or not. I'll talk about that later. Looking for language learning podcasts and audiobooks. And if you're advanced, you may just go straight for the podcasts and audiobooks in the language. I am not going to do this one because I don't know how to cook in English. But if you do know how to cook and you can just now make the one variable the language, it would be great to take a cooking class in the target language. Play video games, especially with dialogues and stories in the target language, and use social media in the target language, or at least read other people's social media. So some fun ways with technology. And here's someone clearly immersed as they're in another country trying to use something audio to learn the language. And let's talk about apps, the free ones first. Duolingo. It's one of the most popular ones these days. It's very user-friendly and gamified. It doesn't have the world's best content. It's really written by computer programmers. The guy who made the CAPTCHAs, that brilliant guy from Carnegie Mellon named Luis von Ahn, he invented this and it's super gamified. It's not, again, the most linguistic rich program, but it does the job because people get addicted to it and it's free. Mango Languages, I used to work for them, so I know all about their program. I love it. And it's free if your library subscribes. If your library doesn't and you're interested, let me know. I may be able to get you a pass for a few months. You can also pay for it. They use conversations to be the structure for the language learning. So it could be very good before you travel if you learn a bunch of conversations related to what you're about to do in that country, like get a hotel room or buy a plane ticket or something like that. So those are very useful. The thing about it that some people don't love is that it records your voice but doesn't score you. But if you like to copy the original audio and hear them side by side, then it's great. And also you get to see what I call transliterations, meaning especially if the other language uses different symbols or symbols that make different sounds than in English, then you can use that option to see the pronunciation. And then Busuu, I haven't used this one myself, but it's got a community of learners, and now they recently integrated AI into it. BBC Learning is for English learners, or ELS, that's in UK English. And then we've got two that are more vocabulary flashcard based with spaced repetition to remind you so you don't forget about the words in specific intervals. And then finally, again, a few more that I'll just move past. Again, if you want this slide deck, let me know and I will gladly give it to you. You can contact me through the QR code that I'll share later. And a few paid apps. Rosetta Stone, this is like the grandfather of them all. It's immersive learning, heavy on images, better for beginners because they're not explaining things in your native language. They're using images to do that. Babbel is one of my other favorites. It uses a lot of different modalities. They do a little bit about pronunciation as well. Pimsleur is very audio focused. It's another grandfather of some of these programs, or one of the granddaddies or OGs. If you're into audio or you want to learn while driving, this might be a good one. They really had their original, it looks like they've expanded, but they were originally just audio focused. And a few others. I'll just move past them in the interest of time. But new apps come out every day. Really finding one that fits your style is the way to go. What about without technology? Well, some things you can do, join meetups. You could also take traditional classes. Fluent City is one that is based in New York City and is more social. There's, maybe an organization or like I think it's called Alliance Française that does the French language learning. So maybe you go to one that's very authentic. But in addition to classes and the traditional style of learning, meetups, traveling, and also one of my favorites, labeling household items or doing things like taking a dance class. But this is not exactly my apartment, but I took stickers that I bought on Amazon of German and labeled almost everything in my household until they peeled off the wall. They try not to take the paint off your wall. So eventually they may curl up and fall off, but it's great to label things. So every day you're exposed to vocabulary words for things that you're actually using and doing. And some of my favorite, fun with movies and television. So a great way to do this is pick a movie in your target language, watch it in the language, but with subtitles in, let's call it English or your native language. And then when you're done watching the movie, watch it again, but switch the subtitles to the target language. So you already know what's going on because you watched it the first time with English subtitles. Now you can see the words in the target language, in their language as subtitles. And then feel comfortable, watch it again with no subtitles, just listening. Yes, it does take 3 times watching a movie to do this, but part of it is about the language learning, not just about watching the movie. And repeat and mimic. So if you want to pause it, be a parrot. Try to copy exactly the sounds with the intonation and syllable stress that the native speaker is doing. Be a parrot, try to copy. And one of my favorite things to do, in Spain, I went and rented Goodfellas, my favorite movie, and I rented it dubbed into Spanish. I knew every word they were about to say because I think every single line of that movie. And so I got to learn a lot of slang and of course, bad words in Spanish while watching Spanish Goodfellas. I think it was called Uno de los Nuestros. Okay. And finally, switch it up, watch some kids shows, game shows, musicals, anything you can to expose yourself to different types of music and movies. And we were on the movie topic and TV shows. And here is somebody must have found Stranger Things, I think this is, with Spanish subtitles. So that was fun. And when it comes to music, so take a song, maybe as a genre you like, in the target language, try to understand it by just listening. Then read the lyrics in the language, see if you get more. Then check out the translation in English, maybe look side by side at those words. Reread the lyrics, and then go back to just listening to the song. And for bonus points, do a YouTube karaoke version of this song and sing along with the words. It's a lot of fun. And if you're in the privacy of your home, nobody will make fun of you. Well, maybe you're the loved ones in your house, but it's good. And then, of course, vary the genre, different styles, different speeds, ones with slang, ones for kids. Here's one of my favorite songs in German. I don't know if anyone knows this song, but I went on YouTube and found the karaoke version. Luckily, you are not going to hear me sing this song, but I totally would. And I have to say, I put this song in my wedding and the DJ played it twice. He liked it so much. All right, coming towards the end. ChatGPT and AI are great tools. So you can go on ChatGPT and ask it, hey, I'm learning beginner French. Can you help simulate a dialogue with me? And you can also ask for translations, grammar explanations. You can say, can you make me some exercises? And tell me about the culture. Can you you could ask it to correct your speech. And you can also ask it for recommendations on things like podcasts and songs and movies and articles and things like that. So here's me asking ChatGPT if we could have a conversation in beginner French. I spelled a bunch of things wrong and used terrible grammar, and it very politely corrected me and told me what I did wrong and what I did right. And it was not painful to hear it. And I will now remember these errors, right? I knew très, but I didn't know how to spell it. And there it corrected me at the bottom. Okay, so let's end this with talking about, before our panel, talking about public speaking. And I'll do this very quickly, but I just want to kind of get the energy back up and say, all right, if you're like this woman who's thinking about speaking a language, let's kind of take our pulse and see, how do you feel? Picture yourself whatever language you're learning. And if not, just go with English, or if you're monolingual and an English speaker. How do you feel about public speaking in this language that you know? Do you feel like, number one, that you're perfect, number two, you're comfortable, three, you're okay, and four, barf emoji? So type in the chat just the number of how you feel when you're thinking about, imagining speaking this language on stage or in front of people in a group, maybe a business presentation. So here's my words of encouragement. I present on this separately. Again, I'll make it really quick. But what I want to say is perform like you've got nothing to lose. Combat the AI effect. And by AI, I do not mean artificial intelligence. I'm talking about a phenomenon that swept the US in popularity. And what we did during this phenomenon is we were glued to our televisions voting for people. What was that phenomenon that starts with AI? American Idol. Why am I talking about American Idol? The reason I'm talking about American Idol is people that were very qualified in their singing abilities, meaning they had great voices and talent and pizzazz and everything. They got really nervous a lot of times before they went out and sang. And even backstage, they'd say, oh God, I hope I don't mess it up. And so they'd come out and sing. And after the show, everybody would vote. And then the next week, someone would lose. Poor person. And she'd cry, or he'd cry, or they'd cry. And after they cried, they would show a montage of all the good and bad times and play this song. Because you had a bad day, you take it one day. Okay, why am I talking about this? Because after this song, they'd tell this person, okay, it's time for you to greet America and sing to us one last time. And they'd have to sing the same song they just lost to. Not their favorite song, the one they literally just lost to the week before. But what would invariably happen? The person was no longer worried about their mistakes. They just went out there and just laid it all on the line because they already lost the show. They had nothing to lose and only fans to gain. So my big message to you is, before speaking, whether it's English or another language or your first or second language, if your focus is, I hope I don't make a mistake, then this is your biggest mistake. Just get out there, be authentic, show everybody what your personality, perspective, poise, playfulness, and passions are. And if you do all of this, then you will really get your message across and make an impact, not worrying about the pronunciation, the grammar, or any of the mistakes. Even though it's great to learn pronunciation, when you're presenting, just go for it. And I always joke, perfection is for posers, passion makes presentations. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to now use the knowledge you got from this presentation and any other experience you've had, including best practices in andragogy, components of languages, the dorky stuff, the tech and non-tech tools, fun stuff, and the mindset hacks like using the you just lost American Idol, now go out there and get your message across to overcome barriers and express yourself fluently in any language. So with that, I hope that this is the better emoji for your upcoming experience speaking the language. And now I would love to introduce the panel to help us with the discussion. And Chris, he's going to make sure that we stay on time. And so we have about 3.5 questions. And so if we can each get to these questions more or less in a minute or so, we should be good. They're short questions just to make everybody aware of your own language learning journey. So we've got 2 panelists. We've got first, we've got Michael Quigley and Elliot Pineda. So let's have each of them unmute. Let's start. Let's see, is Elliot here? Can we start with you?
Yes.
Okay, Elliot,
Hi,
please
Melanie.
introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, what you do, your native language, and the language that you're learning as a second language.
Thank you. I'm Elliot Pineda. I'm from Mexico, the north of Mexico, 6-hour driving from here to Phoenix. So I'm IT guy, and I have a software development company. My native language is Spanish, Español, and I'm learning English.
Excellent. And Michael, would you introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So my name is Michael Quigley. I'm from Lancashire, which is in the northwest of England in the UK. What do I do? Short answer, I do business training. I run my own business called Catolas. My native language is English, British English, I guess you could call it. And I'm trying to learn Spanish.
Excellent. So we've got the English learner learning Spanish and the Spanish learner learning English. Great pair. So now let's mix it up and we'll ask Michael, what has been your biggest challenge in learning this new language? And is it one of these on the list, reading, writing, listening, speaking, or is it something else?
I think it was when I went to Spain last summer with my niece, and just the fact that I try something speaking to a native and it go really well. I try with the next person, I go flat on my face, and that to handle that and just be like, okay, try again. It's not easy, that, especially when people respond to you back in English. And then somebody said to me, "Are you from America? You sound American." And I was like, "No." So I think just like exactly like you said, not taking it personally, staying humble, but just try again, try again, try again, try again. It's always worth the effort. So it was actually that nobody prepared me for that. You think you're going to get it absolutely brilliant, then you might do, and then you might get it really badly, and then you might go up again. And it goes like that. That's the biggest thing for me.
Excellent example. And yes, speaking seems to be one of the hardest pieces for most people. And as you said, you can't kind of control what comes out of your mouth on the spot necessarily as you can with writing. So it makes sense that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it also may have to do with the cooperation and even the kind of linguistic dexterity of the listener. And how about you, Elliot? What's been your biggest challenge?
Definitely speaking, because you are exposed. You don't have time to think. You need to try to communicate. And what I'm trying to do is speak slow. So my goal is communicate and with my colleagues. So writing and listening, yeah, can be easy because you are not exposed.
Exactly. And it's interesting that you picked those two. So if you remember that matrix, it was like the writing ones, including, the reading, writing, and listening. Reading and listening were more passive. Writing is more active, but reading and writing are in that category of written language. So speaking has like the two most difficult things. It's productive and it's oral. So yeah, really interesting that you both picked speaking, and also not surprising. And a follow-up question, since I guess that you both say speaking, how did you work on your speaking and specifically pronunciation? Did you have any exercises that you were doing, any guidance? And were there any problematic sounds that Michael, you found in Spanish, and Elliot, that you found in English? So let's switch it up again, and we'll start with Elliot on this one. How did you work on your speech?
Okay, first of all was understand that English is two languages in one. One is speaking, and you have one pronunciation, and another one separately is reading. So you need to learn to speak and read. So if you know how to read, that don't mean nothing talking. So what I did is start coming to a lot of meetings in Global Chamber, hear the sounds, hear the all the words or pronunciation, and try to use the same words because I'm just learning, and try to spend a lot of time in the States and trying to practice a lot and making mistakes.
I love that. And for me, I will just note that when I was learning Spanish, I mean, I'm always still learning Spanish, but when I was looking at spelling rules, I said, wow, this language is immaculate. If you know how to write the word, you can say it. And there are rules about the syllable stress and the vowels. Even the way I like to give an example of the word lasagna. When I was in Spain, I saw that it was written Lasagna. Not they took the Italian word and put it in the Spanish spelling and pronounced it lasagna the way it was then written. So it's a very reliable language, Spanish, the spelling to the pronunciation. English is phonetic, but not so reliable. So really makes sense why you mentioned that it almost feels like two different languages. And how about you, Michael?
I think two things. First thing was for me recognizing that as an English speaker who speaks English, I'm actually globally in the minority because most people speak American English. And when my Spanish teacher said to me, "Oh, I sent your podcast to my friends in Spain," I said, "Did they like it?" They said, "They didn't understand your accent." So it was very humbling to, and they're like, "You don't understand, everyone watches Netflix, the American English." So once you get over that, you have to recognize that. So what you do, like Melanie with the accent reduction, is so important. And then kind of like Elliot was saying, Spanish to me is two languages, because you've got Spanish is spoken in Spain and Latin American Spanish. And I have a client and they have people all over Latin America, and, speaking to people from Mexico and all different countries, you hear the sheer variety of it, which is wonderful. But then for me, the sir or the th, so cinco or cinco, the majority of people are going to do the second one. But my teacher's like, no, you do it this way. It's kind of like British English that the Queen speaks. You know, you need to know what it is, but it doesn't mean that you use it all of the time. So people laugh at me because I try and speak Spanish like a Spanish person, but I'm not. So I come across as this English Spanish sounding hybrid. But most people don't really care. But that's the biggest one. And I just listened to native speakers. I got obsessed with Pasión de Gavilanes. I watched the whole first season. Cesaro backed me up on that. Some people don't like it, some people love it. But it was really good to hear the words in context. So like you said before, the emotion, rather than just seeing it on a thing. You hear somebody when they're really angry, you hear how they actually use that, because that's mainly Colombian.
And can you put that in the chat as well so other people can check it out?
Sure.
That would be great. And I will say this, when I used to, so I learned Spanish mostly in Spain, and then I came back here to teach English as a second language, and I used Spanish in my instruction, and my students laughed at me and said I sounded like Enrique Iglesias, which I took as the biggest compliment, but they were laughing at my Castilian. So yeah, great examples. Thank you.
Melanie,
Okay. Yeah.
I would love, we're running short on time, so I want to see if anyone here who's been with us the whole way has a burning question for you.
Yes, let me go to, first of all, thank you. Before I say anything, feel free to scan this code and let's move to Q&A. I'll put the code back in a second, but yes, let's do Q&A and then we can always come back to the panel. So thank you for keeping us on time, Chris. So who's got a question? And again, as you're looking for questions, please do scan my code. Let me know your feedback. You can get the free download of the accent tips. And if you want this deck, you can also request it here. So please scan away and ask away in the chat. And we can have Joey maybe help us asking any questions that have popped up from the beginning until now.
Let me just scroll back through and see if there were any questions that I might have missed.
Okay, great. And if you don't have any questions, then what we can do is move back to the panel and ask them some more questions and put them in the hot seat.
I actually wanted to ask you something, Melanie.
Yes.
You mentioned early in your presentation that learning a new language can help lower stress levels. And I'm wondering if you or our panelists could attest to that or explain that more.
I have an example. So one thing that I think it can do is just kind of take you out of your body and mind for a moment and put you in another spot. So for example, I had a crazy reaction to the COVID booster and I ended up in the ER. And it was very uncomfortable being in the ER because I was in pain and I was waiting and I had somebody vomiting next to me and I was just like, get me out of here. And one of the first things I did was I opened up my Mango app on my phone and I put my headset in and I started learning German. I mean, I was learning German, but I continued my German learning. And I have to say, it kind of took me out of where I was and I was immersed in some language learning activity and completely kind of took away time and space of where I was and was an excellent distraction. Now, not everybody may feel exactly relaxed if they're, struggling as a beginner, but just find something that will, that's your style, find a language that you're interested in. And if you're motivated enough and willing to make mistakes, hopefully it would kind of take you out of the moment with all of the busy adulting that everyone's doing. So that's my answer. Does anyone else from the panel or elsewhere want to answer that? Okay, I'll take it as a not yet, but if nothing, Joey, did anything pop in the chat or should we go back to the panel for the last 2 minutes?
The only question we have in chat is just a second ago from Felix asking for a list of the apps, which I'll grab a screenshot of from the PowerPoint and drop in.
Yes, and also if you guys can go to the QR code, that will contact me. So you could have my freebie on ways to learn accents. And also if you tell me, hey, I want a copy of this deck, just put it in there. I'd also love your feedback. So if you have any feedback on this presentation on how I can do it better next time or something you didn't like, have questions about, this is your way to contact me. So let's just move it back a moment just to the last question and then, or we can kick it back. If we can just do one word or a couple word answer, if we can ask the panelists, just what's been the in your language learning, any pro or con of your method or something, just a tip that you want to share with the audience, and we'll do it quick and then we'll bring it back to Chris and Susan. Start with Michael.
Yeah, get a proper teacher because they can show you the grammar, which is essential. So you're not just making it up as you go along.
Excellent. And Elliot?
Have a team or a group where you can practice
Excellent.
and where you can feel free when you share some ideas, when you share passions. So these guys are not looking for you because your language. They are trying to communicate and learn each other. I think that are the best groups to do it.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for the quick answers. And it's really helpful for the team to see folks learning language in progress and what they can share. So back to you, Chris, and then I think back to Susan.
Melanie, thank you so much. I found that extremely informative. I hope all of the people here did as well. One thing I want to mention to all of you is attend as many Global Chamber virtual meetings as you can, because you can hear people speaking from around the world every single week, almost every day of the week. You'll notice that when I introduced Melanie, I spoke pretty quickly because I was so excited and amped up for this call. You'll notice that Melanie spoke pretty quickly because she had a lot of information to get through. But when you're learning and communicating with someone, it's okay to take your time when you're speaking a new language, when you're trying to get the accent right. And maybe taking your time can lower your stress levels, and then you'll enjoy it more. Melanie, that was wonderful. Susan, do you have anything to add to cap this off?
Yes, I do. Well, thank you both, and thank you for the panel. It was great to learn more about gaining confidence in speaking different languages. So I do want to invite everyone here to our next two coming events, World Trade Week, New York City. We are co-partnering with many organizations around New York City, May 9th, 1 to 4 p.m. at Baruch College. So that is an in-person meeting and something not to be missed. And then May 16th, our chapter will be doing a program on international shipping and cargo security. And actually 4 of our members are going to be participating in it. Nicole Polidar from the Port of New York, New Jersey, Scott Betty of Kuhn & Nagel, and Jermiel Lewis Johnson, just your broker, and Monica Varas, who is on this call with us today. So don't miss that, May 16th, 1 p.m. and Eastern. And that will be a global Globinar. So everyone here can do that. So talking about security would be like what's going on in the Red Sea and problems with your cargo. So thanks, everybody. And Melanie's presentation will be available after this event. It has been recorded. Certainly everybody should link up and network with each other. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Elliot. Wonderful program. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, everyone. See you guys soon. And please go ahead and contact me through the QR code and get you whatever you need. Thanks. See you next time.
Thanks, Melanie.
Thanks for